8:06. Time to talk politics with the Green Party co-leader Russel Norman joining us this morning. Good morning to you, Russell.
Good morning, Wammo.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
Good. First up, let's look at the economic situation around the world and how that is affecting New Zealand. The Prime Minister says that we're in good shape. We're going to come through this brand new crisis, smelling of roses. Everything's going to be fine. Do you believe him?
I think it's possible, but we do have some pretty significant vulnerabilities. In terms of public debt, the government's growing the public debt pretty quickly, pushing it up towards 75 billion net core crown debt by 2015. And in terms of private debt, we already had a very significant vulnerability in private sector debt before this government took over. The last government basically sat to one side while private sector debt got out of control. So when you look at both private and public sector debt, we do have some challenges.
Are we in a better place, though, in your opinion, than many other countries?
Well, certainly we're in a better place than other countries like clearly the United States is in deep trouble, partly because their political system is struggling to deal with the situation. But in terms of overall indebtedness, we're not that far off some of the worst. I mean, we're pushing 80% of GDP net debt positions, and so we do have some significant challenges, and that's why Standard & Poor's did single us out, in part because of our level of indebtedness, in part because of our vulnerabilities of some of our export markets if China goes belly up.
How much notice should we be taking of Standard & Poor's? I mean, America loves Standard & Poor's when their rating was AAA, and as soon as it goes to AA, Obama says, oh, look, just ignore that, we're still a AAA country. And the same sort of situation here with John Key, I mean, he's a man with a banking background. Standard & Poor's would have been, it's a sort of standard measurement of things, and but now he's like, they don't know what they're talking about.
The thing about Standard & Poor's is to, we should take what they say with a grain of salt. I mean, they were the ones who got the global financial crisis totally wrong. So they were basically giving very high credit ratings to a whole bunch of what turned out to be junk bonds that IAG were promoting. But anyway, I mean, so I think that we should always have scepticism towards the ratings agencies, but, there is some validity to the argument around debt, but particularly the private sector debt that New Zealand built up over the last decade, that when we borrowed so we could, buy houses off each other, that's left a huge hangover over the New Zealand economy. The upside to New Zealand was, the last Labor government, they were terrible at managing private sector debt and did nothing about the housing boom, but they did pay down public sector debt, and that's what's given us a bit of leeway in dealing with the current crisis. But we can't forever keep borrowing and increasing public sector debt.
What about the price of oil? Where is that tracking at the moment? Because the New Zealand dollar has been riding really high, and that's kind of been cushioning us against sort of higher oil prices, but it may be tracking further down now. Where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, the combination of the dropping New Zealand dollar, but also there has been some softening of oil prices, are kind of neutralising each other, if you like.
Right.
So New Zealand was lucky when oil prices rose, so did the value of the dollar, and now the value of the dollar is dropping and oil prices are going down. But it's pretty marginal. I mean, the long-term trend of oil prices remains up, and, it's having a significant impact. I mean, people are driving less. I mean, what we've seen... there's some very interesting work coming out now about peak cars, as they call it, which is about the peak number of kilometres travelled per person. And it looks like we've already gone through peak cars because the combination of congestion and increased oil prices, people aren't using their cars as much as they did a few years ago, and probably never will again. And so, that obviously that should have implications for transport policy. Of course, it doesn't, because our transport planners are crazy, but if they were sane, it would have implications for transport policy.
Because we're still planning more motorways, right?
Yeah, I mean, the government's plan is to spend $19 billion over the next decade on new motorways. So they've cut spending for public transport, maintenance of local roads, walking, cycling, everything else, in order to throw every possible dollar into new motorway projects. It is an extraordinary, insane kind of thing to do.
Finally, what's your views on a new sort of standard worldwide currency that everything else is measured against? I think there's a name for it, but currently, of course, that's the US dollar. China is suggesting that it's another currency. I'm not sure if they're suggesting their own or something brand new made up. What do you think?
There is a logic to having some kind of global reserve currency because it does give stability to the global financial system. And, obviously the golden years in the post-war period, we had the whole Bretton Woods Agreement that created the framework, and that was the US dollar became effectively the reserve for that. The breakup of that system in the 70s and 80s has led to a fundamental instability in global financial markets. If we had agreement amongst all the largest economies on what such a reserve currency might look like, or a reserve system might look like, then I think it would actually help create some more stability in the system. And also, if we introduced a Tobin tax, which has been proposed by many economists over many years now, which is basically to throw some grit in the wheels of international currency speculators. So they pay a small tax every time they change currency from one currency to another. And the idea of Tobin tax is to slow down the amount of speculation in the system, which adds volatility. So there are things you can put in place that would reduce the volatility in the system, and that would help the real economy rather than the speculator's economy that John Key is so familiar with.
Interesting. Thanks very much for chatting to us all about that. Russell Norman, co-leader of the Greens. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Eric.
Time now here on Kiwi, 21 minutes past